WZDX is proud to launch Mental Health Mondays. Every Monday, we'll get insight from professionals on some of the things you and your loved ones could be struggling with during this uncertain time. Mental health can sometimes be tough to talk about, and our Sydney Stallworth tells us why seeking help could be more crucial now than ever, and tells us we can all start, or how we can all start the conversation.
It can be tough because you are questioning someone's actions, behavior, and characteristics. And a lot of times, because this is a part of us, our daily actions, we get offended because you're questioning something that is a part of me.
A poll by the Kaiser Family Foundation says 53% of adults in the United States said their mental health had been negatively impacted due to worry and stress over the coronavirus in July. That was up 20% from just 4 months before. From anxiety to feelings of isolation, more people in the U.S. are struggling to cope. So if you notice some changes in someone you love, how should you approach them?
First and foremost, we need to ensure that we educate ourselves about what we want to discuss. Someone may be displaying some feelings and symptoms of depression. Educate yourself on what depression is, what that looks like.
Sometimes just starting the conversation can be the hardest part. Psychotherapist and counselor Monretta Vega has some tips.
Start the conversation with I statements. And I statements are specifically directed from you. So for instance, we would say, I am feeling concerned. Because I've noticed you've been sleeping a lot, or I've noticed that you've been irritable.
But what if you're noticing changes in your own behavior?
Actions, sleeping patterns, appetite. Try not to diagnose yourself, and then also be open to the different avenues of treatment and assistance.
Vega says it's important to talk to people about how you feel.
When we are trying to do the process of therapy or seeking treatment for our mental health alone, we can find reasons, and I can call them excuses, to stop the process.
Telemedicine has been booming during the pandemic. One of the most popular services, mental health resources.
If you are thinking about therapy or counseling, if it's crossed your mind, let's go ahead and check it out. It's a reason why it crossed your mind. And yes, there's an increase in it, but there is space for you.
You can find a list of local resources and other tips on RocketCityNow.com. Putting the volley first, Sydney Stallworth, WZDX News.